Well, welcome everyone to another episode, a very special episode of HR and Payroll 2.0. I'm Pete Tiliakis, and as always, I'm joined by the legendary Julie Fernandez.
Thanks, Pete. Great to see you. Great to see everyone. We are actually doing something super special today. We're at you live from the HR Tech Conference in Las Vegas. Excited to be here and super excited for our special guest today.
Exactly. Yes, I'm very excited for this. This is an executive I admire greatly. I have followed his work and his path, obviously with Daily Pay. And now, again, Jason Lee, founder, entrepreneur, visionary, futurist, and now the head of Salt Labs. And just excited to have you here, Jason.
Well, Pete and Julie, am I dreaming? I've been wanting to be on this podcast forever. And so I really appreciate you taking that brown envelope from me and getting me on to this podcast. No, but seriously, it's great to see you both. I love this show. You had mentioned Daily Pay. That's where we launched that company. I was a lot younger, a lot skinnier, no kids, and
you still got your hair.
A little less frazzled.
A little bit more hair, a little less frazzled. But I remember I got up on stage at, back then I was doing the best new technologies pitch, if you remember that, or the version that they have now. But going in front of a bunch of folks who, I had no idea what this was all about, HR tech, and I never set out to start an HR tech company, but here we were, and this show has always been, such an incredible opportunity for me, for us. Now my new company, we're launching it here again. And so, really on behalf of all entrepreneurs, thank you guys for always supporting the community and for just being just amazing friends and colleagues in the space. So thank you.
Well, thank you.
Both.
Thank you. I appreciate it. We created this show really to bring conversations to the table, right? We were always having these executive conversations. You and I have had several, and I love them, right? And I always we could record these. These would be gold. So what I wanted to do is continue some of the combos we've been having lately. But before we get started, I want to ask your opinion. You're obviously, like I said, a futurist, a visionary. What excites you while you're here? What have you seen? What do you hope to see? What's the pulse so far?
Well, look, I know the right answer is A.I. But let me tell you what I'm actually most excited about is when you come to a show like this and you actually see the wide breadth of vendors and frankly practitioners who aren't really looking for just one solution. I talked to a bunch of folks who said, we're not ready for AI. We're not ready for that implementation. We're not ready to put that into production. But what we are looking for is a really, really darn good, fill in the blank employee engagement product or a new HCM or a new payrolls, and what I love about this is you've got kind of classic, we just want to upgrade our product and upgrade our service better. And then you've got super cutting edge stuff, and then you've got stuff in between. And what excites me the most is the thing that has always been so mind-boggling to me. HR technology, meaning this is one of the most incredibly robust and fertile areas of technology development. And that's not what you think of when you think of Toby.
Right.
And when you think of HR, you don't think of those things. But what you don't realize is it's all being operated in the back end through very complex technology, very cutting edge stuff, the biggest providers of cloud data. It's all HR related. I was excited to see Microsoft.
Right.
The presence Microsoft has, and we all knew Viva was coming, but they've got a huge presence here. I had 3 meetings with Microsoft when I was here at the conference, just about all variety of topics. So I'm excited by all of it, Pete.
It's fun to have gone from the back closet where HR always had the least developed stuff to, being a leader in the cloud space around our functional technologies, and now really being on the forefront of some of the AI and automation and different activities. And it's great to be on the forefront of things in technology instead of in the laggard.
Well, so here's kind of a wild thought, which is, here's an analogy. When you look at the advent of digital payments, well, actually what happened, the place where that actually advanced the most was in China. Now, why did that happen? Because China was actually a cash-based society. They skipped the whole credit card thing. So they skipped a whole generation and just went to mobile phone payments. And now people, homeless people ask for donations through mobile. I say that analogy to kind of talk about HR, which is, I think in part because there are so many aspects of HR that were left a little bit behind historically. Now it's such an opportunity for, in particular, things like generative AI yes, a job description. Yes, these things are great opportunities for practitioners to be able to use those tools in kind of unique ways. And so it's sort of like you skipped over a bit of a generation,
leapfrogging
and now you kind of get the best of the best.
Yeah. I'll tell you what I love is that, the community here. I was telling someone yesterday, they asked me what my favorite thing about, or the best thing that's happened to me this week. And I said, well, one of the best things is walking down the hallway and all the hugs that you get, all the reunion. It's almost like the first day of school again, like, hey. But back to your point, like I love the mainstream nature of HCM now, right? I was talking to one of the vendors, their name is on one of the NFL stadiums. That wasn't 5 years ago, right? You've got Phil Mickelson wearing an HCM shirt on golf, right? You've got, but more importantly, big tech has come in and said, hey, we need to do something to help employers and really putting their power to HCM. So I love it. I think there's just so much, and they're solving real problems that employers need solved. And it's not easy, man. It's not easy.
Yeah,
it's
so long as they don't go into my areas, I'm totally there with you. Okay,
That's right.
so long as they're not creating salt or on-demand pay, I'm totally there with you.
Yeah. No, I agree. Hopefully. No, I don't know, man. You're always disruptive, so you're probably ahead of everybody else anyway. But look, I want to continue on some of the conversation we've been having lately, and I know we've exchanged some things on social media with different topics, but just this topic of like the workplace being broken, right? Like that's what a lot of these folks are in here in this room trying to solve. And you could look at a lot of symptoms of why the workplace is broken, right? You've got productivity. I've been to I don't know how many conferences this year, and I promise you productivity has been almost top of the list. Engagement still lives at the top of the list. Retention, development, finding, all of that is on everyone's mind. So like how do you get all of that? How do you pick a technology that's going to fix all that? And what do you do, right? Is technology even the right answer? I don't know.
Well, look, I mean, let's state the obvious, which is the human condition is deeply unsatisfied. And so I don't care what, faith background or what family background you have, the human condition is deeply unsatisfied. And so, yes, people will leave jobs, on a regular basis. And by the way, when the jobs are hard and when they are difficult and when they are physically grueling or taxing, the people are more likely to leave those jobs. And so there is an element of the human condition. But putting that aside just for one moment, look, when I sort of survey what's going on, when I talk to practitioners, and I spend a lot of my time talking to C-suite folks, operators, practitioners, not so much other vendors, because I'm a provider myself, but I will tell you, there's an element of this, which is, yes, things haven't changed. This morning I had a call with the CEO of a nursing home, a 3,000 person nursing home. And he said, well, look, Jason, turnover in our industry has been 100% 30 years ago. It's 100% 10 years ago, and it's 100% now. And so there's an element of, as I said, the human condition, which is, look, these are by definition high turnover industries. With that said, I think that there's one of the aspects of HR technology that I think we don't talk enough about is the fact that HR, and I don't mean human resources corporate, I mean humans, are constantly evolving. And oftentimes the technology is actually not catching up with where the humans actually are. I'll give you a great example from a space that I'm more familiar with, which is we spend a lot of time thinking about, and some of this comes from the Burson research and whatnot, but thinking about, hey, people get consumer grade experiences in their personal lives. Okay, what does that look like now at work? And that dissonance that creates, at some point, it just becomes untenable for a worker to be satisfied at work. In my old company, I used to say a lot, well, look, these kids are growing up thinking that money moves instantly. And you're trying to tell me you think someone's going to wait around for 2-week payroll?
There's a hamster back there.
The way to think that is over. It's not going to happen. And I remember 7 years ago, I said, this is inexorable. Okay, whether you like it or not, it's going to happen. And you can either join me now, okay, or, and by the way, I had just come back from the APA, which was the American Payroll Association conference, which is a lot more payroll focused.
Now Payroll Org.
Now Payroll Org. And I'm friends with these guys. I love them all. But I told them, I said, either you listen to, you hear what I'm saying today, or this is going to sneak up on you. And look at where we are now. 10 million people using on-demand pay, all in the US, and it's global now. And
becomes an expectation, right?
And now it's an expectation.
It's a standard piece of the stack, payroll stack.
And so all of that to say, humans are evolving, and they're evolving in their personal lives. Hence, you got to make sure that at work, we're offering concomitant or commensurate experiences at work.
Yeah. We'll try to spend some cash now. And most people don't. Well, I've taken trips literally where the entire trip I couldn't give my cash away. They wanted just digital pay.
Right.
So it's almost like an expectation that you're going to do that anyway, and society's going that route. So yeah, absolutely. So look, we talk about these things being broken, right? And a lot of times it's like, oh, well, you can just, throw more money at it. You can just throw more bodies at it. And the reality of it is I don't think today more bodies is a linear path to productivity, right? It just isn't happening. Yeah. And wages are, they're going up, but inflation is going up. So it's not really, it's just a wash. In fact, a lot of folks, I think there's data that says even in all that wage increases we saw during the pandemic and after, it got eaten up by the inflation, right? So even those things traditional ways aren't necessarily working. I feel like you got to get out of the box.
Well, let me say something that might be a little controversial. But let's make sure the listeners keep on listening. Why not? Why not torch the place now?
We have to. We're expecting that from you, Jason.
Last time I bring him on this thing. But let me say something that's probably a little not a little inartful. But here's kind of my perspective, which is wages have gone up. And by the way, that's a great thing, and employers should do that. And inflation is out there, but that's a good thing. But I want to be very clear. That's helping the employee meet her needs. That has nothing to do with whether or not the employee feels recognized. So these are two separate matters. One matter is, are we actually paying someone a wage where she can still come to work because she's got gas, fix the car, eat, pay the rent, put food on the table, a livable wage. And we can debate, I'm not a big politics guy, we can debate what that level is, but that's what the purpose of wages are. Wages are inherently structurally, it is impossible structurally to use wages, in my opinion, as a way to recognize an employee because in the hourly workforce, you have to pay everyone statutorily the same. How is that a differentiator if everyone's getting paid the same? Yeah. And so I think when I talk to companies, they ask me, I don't get it. I just raised wages 30% over the past 12 to 18 months. And my employees, they haven't changed their behavior at all. Yeah. I mean, that's usually accompanied with some impolite things. And what I have to tell them is I say, listen, respectfully, that has nothing to do with whether or not an employee feels acknowledged or recognized. That's a separate discussion. You need to deploy technology or a different approach or get your managers to figure it out, because at the end of the day, that employee is only going to stay if she feels engaged, broadly defined. That's actually what gets someone to stay. That is separate and apart from how much she's getting paid.
Yeah, talent is seeking work now instead of work seeking talent. Right. I mean, really, the worker is in control.
That's right.
Much more.
They're driving. They're driving the show, and that's.
We were talking. The union, the whole thing, right? Every day, I feel like another major. Right, we've got Hollywood going crazy. We've got the auto
I'm in
workers.
Detroit.
Yeah, she's in Detroit. She knows the auto workers. You saw the Kaiser. I don't know where the Kaiser thing ended up. The big healthcare. Yeah. That's scary. That's scary. And I'm sure there's others that we're not even thinking of. It's like there's this battle between upper management and the frontline worker. Yet the frontline worker are the product in a lot of industries. So how do you reconcile those?
So look, in the Hollywood thing in particular, and look, I'm not a big movie.
Yeah,
as I
I've
said,
got a lot of experience.
I have 3 kids. I have 3 kids. I can't remember the last time I watched television or watched a movie, but I guess Disney. I guess Disney. Yeah. But the Hollywood one, I think, is a very interesting case study of what people want. So if you actually get underneath, well, what are these people striking about? And there's some AI and all this stuff, but really what they're striking about is a concept called residuals. And I don't know if you know this concept, but it's essentially, hey, I as a writer or I as an actor, I perform on a gig or I do a show, and the concept used to be, well, if that show got syndicated, so take Friends, remember the old show Friends, that's rerunning, all day long on, UPN.
My wife is all over it, watching reruns. Yep, she's contributing.
and each time that gets played, well, Jennifer Aniston is getting a quote residual. Yep. What happened, and this is what happens with technology, well, all of a sudden, the big technological advance in the media industry in the last 10 years was streaming. And Netflix was smart enough to say, we're going to buy the catalog. Yeah. There's no more residuals. We're not borrowing this thing. We bought it. Yeah. No more residuals. And so now all of a sudden these actors are saying, Netflix is playing this all day long, and I'm not getting a piece of my ownership. And I tell that long story to get to this point, which is, I think the modern workforce, it's about that issue. It's about ownership. People don't want to just work and get a paycheck.
They expect that already. That's baseline.
That's the law.
Yeah,
That's
that's-
baseline.
They think that's the law, and it is the law. That's a statutory thing that they're receiving. They want a piece of ownership.
That's right.
You know, I'm not a big soccer fan, but if you saw, if you're familiar with this player, Messi, down in Lionel Messi.
Lionel Messi, yes.
Down in Florida. You know, he was offered a deal for $1.5 billion to play overseas, and he turned it down.
That's right.
He turned down a $1.5 billion salary. Now, I'm glad he's not a daily pay user. Okay, because I don't know where I'm going to come up with that. But he turned that down. Now, why did he turn it down? It's because the gig that he actually took, what he negotiated was, I want a piece of the team. Not only do I want a piece of the team, I want a piece of every time Apple TV shows a game that I am on, because I know that I am helping Apple TV sell more product because people want to watch me play in the US. It's this attitude of, I'm the product.
Yeah.
And I think labor, look, they're not Lionel Messi and they're not Hollywood writers, but that theme is existing, which is, I'm the product and I'm the most important part of this equation. So I kind of want my piece of it.
Well, right down into the sports for colleges and, even below that.
Yes.
I mean, the same argument is playing out over and over again.
That's right. And it played out there for the individual.
Yeah.
I think what's going to happen is it's going to creep into media rights.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
You know, well, why shouldn't LeBron James get a piece of the advertising revenue when he's being interviewed by Jim Gray as to, is he going to Miami or is he going to stay in Cleveland?
Yeah.
And I think that probably becomes the model. And I guarantee you, when you start seeing that play out on social media, on TikTok, that will filter down to the worker at McDonald's. And she will say to herself, well, where's my piece? Like, and that's sort of what I mean by these big tectonic shifts that are happening in culture, in society, amplified through social media, through TikTok. Like, for my job is to look at all of that and say, okay, so what's going to come out of that as it relates to how people comport themselves at work?
Yeah.
And the dissonance that just continues to get wider and wider.
Yeah, well, it is that divide, right? And just to go back to that, I managed payroll for the Walt Disney Company, and was very intimate with that Hollywood world. And what I'll highlight there is that people don't realize is not everybody is Brad Pitt. Not everybody's getting Brad Pitt money. Not everybody's getting Lionel Messi money.
Right.
There's a lot of people involved in making Brad Pitt's movies come to the forefront that are behind the line that you're not seeing, and those people aren't being taken care of the way they should. And by the way, if you're a vendor out there focused on the gig economy, I've been saying this for a long time. It's been happening in Hollywood since 1930 something. You can go out there and see exactly how it works and how it functions. But you're right. I think there's a disparity between the upper Brad Pitts of the world and the executives maybe getting, and the frontline guy who is the product, getting it done, making it happen, that's not being compensated fairly or getting that equity. Right?
It strikes me because I'm working with an investment company now where you have some high performers, and then you have a lot of support activity that is necessary to make all the magic happen. And it strikes me that, we've always had this focus on executive compensation, how we make things special. And now we almost need the reverse, right? We need the focus on how do I bring some of the residuals, right, down into the organization so that the base layer of contributors feels like they have a stake in what's going on.
Right.
And it's going to require some special administration and some special thinking in order to do that.
That's
and
right.
that'll be different for every industry, really,
That's right.
and for every employer value proposition.
I just like being on this podcast. I don't want to get into products or things like that, but I will tell you, and for people who might be listening in, I think the key to this issue, yes, there will be, as you said, structures or administration or things. I think the key though is, how do you leverage technology where it's not coming top down, where you can fix this issue or get to that effect by actually going bottoms up through the employee. Because we're in an environment right now, and yes, HR tech is great and there's a lot going on here, but let's face it, we're in an environment where stuff is contracting. We are in a contracting environment, and what I'm hearing from practitioners and operators is, give me something where I can do more with less, and I need more with less. I want to consolidate these kind of areas over here. oh, you've got something that answers, an A, B, and C priority. Great, because I'm using point solutions for each of, I'm using 3 different point solutions. And so we are seeing, I am hearing that, in certain areas around this. So I think it's companies making that decision, and then it's people like us coming up with technology which enables them to do it like super cheaply
And data,
and
right?
super effectively.
You need granular data to be able to figure out how do I do that with any type of a data foundation so that it's equitable.
Yeah. Do you think there's companies out there right now that are doing it exceptionally well? At this point?
Well, there's, employers?
Yeah, employers. Sorry.
Well, look, let me give you one example that's not going to be helpful, but because I think it's bespoke.
Yeah, because I'll tell you, compensation in general seems to be angsty too, and I'm hearing that around here. Like compensation is still an area people are challenged by.
Yeah,
just generally.
Let me give you 2 quick ones. Okay, the first is, and this one's bespoke, but the second one is something you may or may not have heard of that's in the market right now. The first one is Ben Affleck. Speaking of Hollywood, Ben Affleck and Matt Damon. So they started a production company. And they released their first film. It was called Air. It was a story of Michael Jordan. But really the star of that was Michael Jordan's mother. And how amazing her mother was. His mother was. And there's this pivotal moment where, and you can see here there's a theme, but there's a pivotal moment where she's on the phone with Nike. And Nike's saying, well, we're going to pay you $3 million.
Yeah. They were giving him, at the time, a lucrative contract.
We'll give you
it was not that big. Right?
All these, and she just said, I want a piece of every shoe he sells.
Yeah.
And it's this amazing moment where you realize he is the product.
Yeah.
And you're going to sell more shoes because it's Michael Jordan. Forget the cash deal. And that deal is still paying dividends to this day, obviously. I've got a pair of Air Jordans upstairs, and he is still making something on that shoe because he owns that right.
Yeah.
The second example I would give you, or a category I would give you, is the private equity firm, and this is ironic, you don't normally hear things like this out of private equity, but the private equity firm KKR.
Yes.
I don't know if you followed this, but a friend of mine, a guy called Pete Stravos, who you guys should get to know, he's responsible for the entire U.S. private equities business. And what they are taking is a very unique approach to the private companies they acquire. What they're saying is, and they, they'll acquire some widget maker in the middle of Kansas. And what they'll tell the employees, because the employees are always very nervous. They hear all nightmare stories about private equity and New Yorkers coming in,
fired,
cost cutting. And by the way, that they do a lot of those things. But what they've done is they've created a private stock ownership mechanic where every single employee gets privately owned shares in the company. And when the company gets sold or when it IPOs, those shares pay out. And they've sold now a couple of these companies. And these, so you got a forklift maker who just gets a one-time payout of 10x his salary. Life-changing. The last company they sold, the minimum payout, was 2x annual salary. The max was 32 times.
It's
I'd
hard
love
to be
to see
bitter.
their productivity metrics, right? Like, what are their back end results?
Yes, and they're seeing it, and it's working.
Yeah.
The absenteeism way down, productivity way up. Things like enabling the employees to want to say things to management. So the story that Pete tells is, he's like, well, before the employees never thought their voices were heard, but now they're like, wait a minute, I'm an owner. I actually have a stake in this. So a guy raises his hand and says, hey, I just wanted to let you know that the way you guys do this milk route that I have to deliver, there's like, you can make this 3 times more efficient and we can put more milk in it. And so he becomes part of the process. What the KKR folks are doing is amazing. But by Pete's own admission, he says, but look, this is really hard. It's time consuming and not every company can do it. And so, again, not a lead in, but that's what my new company does, is it tries to create an ability for the hourly worker in a highly scalable, simple, not using private stock and all these things, but basically using technology to create an equity-like ownership payout for the hourly worker. So the paycheck to paycheck person all of a sudden saying, well, now I feel like an owner in the job through the technology that we're building. So I don't want to go down Salt Labs is, that's, by the way, Salt Labs .com, but SALT.
No, all good, man. All good. I love that you bring it up.
But yes, but that's the short answer to, I think,
Yeah.
doing it very well.
But Jason, I have a question on that. So is the line that's drawn really the hourly worker, or what about, there's an awful lot of space up into middle management and salaried workforce that is not the executive, the C-suite and the executives that are really the biggest takers, right, in those stories. So is it really the line at hourly, or does it creep up quite a bit?
I agree with you.
Yeah.
It's a line that we have drawn artificially because, we as a company, and certainly me as an individual and as a leader, I just have a very, very particular interest and frankly life calling, I feel like, to build great technology for really the most disadvantaged and low income workers in the country. But it doesn't mean that issue does not persist. I'll give you an example. At my first company, DailyPay, 12% of our users made over $100,000 a year. Now, just let that sink in.
Interesting, right?
12% of our users could not afford to pay a bill on time, and they're making six figures a year. My father never made over $60,000 a year when he raised two kids in the U.S. And so it kind of puts things into perspective.
Yeah, I often wonder, just because sometimes there isn't that much differentiation between some of the hourly workforce up to the salaried workforce that is, kind of that middle layer. And so it'll be interesting to watch, as you evolve, how that comes about.
I've definitely seen more. We were talking about this at breakfast. More companies looking at the making it employee owned in their organizations and trying to hold on
I've
to
heard
talent.
about this.
I mean, it's tough, right? Like you keep seeing data on shifts adoption going down, right? UKG puts out great data on shifts. The frontline worker. So much. We were talking about like today customer service being dead, and I'm like, I don't know that it's dead. It's just that it's just not staffed and the quality isn't there like it was, right? Like the experiences of going out to eat or whatever, and it's largely talent based, right? And and I know they have so many things to compete for, right? Like you've got the creator economy happening, so now employees have much more autonomy and ability to say, no, this is how I want to be treated and compensated, and this is how long I'll work here.
But Pete, that you've tapped into something that's critical, which is Taco Bell is not a creator economy company. They still need to hire people, but what you have to come to grips with is there are now alternatives. When I was growing up, there was one supermarket in town, and that's where I worked. When I went to college, I worked at Chili's. There were very, very few opportunities to figure out how to pay your bills when I was growing up. But mobile and the internet has completely, radically changed people's, and for many good things, has given people a lot more choice. And so now they don't have to work that job. And if you're an employer who needs people in that type of profile, you better very quickly figure out how to interact with them, because the analog way of doing things, it ain't going to work. Like it's just not going to work.
Doing more of what we've done in the past, you're right. And I think there's a lot of organizations that are still throwing the same effort at the same problem, and they're getting the same outcomes, and they're like, what do we do, right? So I think you've got to get creative. I think you got to get really agile and be willing to open up and say, hey, maybe there's another way of doing this, and we need to go and see what it is. But
a couple of years ago, creativity was just, maybe people can job share or work part-time or be mobile or be virtual. And now I think, it's like to the next level, right? Now you have to think about, okay, well, if I'm having people work less than a full-time, now how do I engage them? And how do I make sure that they're rewarded? And, and they might be as forgotten as the hourly population, just because historically corporations have not felt that the part-time workforce or gig workforce is really the core contributor, and they're making up bigger and bigger percentages of the workforce.
Let me ask you both a question, from my seat, which is, I'm just curious, do you feel like companies are giving up? This has been such a long, persistent problem. Do they just accept life and say, it's going to be 100% turnover, and I'm just going to get used to it?
It just is what it is.
It just is. That's why labor
I'm going to defer to Julie first. She's on the front lines much more with customers on a transformation basis.
Or do they still want to get at it? Do they still believe?
I feel like they still believe. And, the real challenge,
they have to believe.
They have to
believe.
Because you can't go without workers, right? But I do feel sometimes like there's an over-reliance on how can technology solve this for me, because it's more difficult. I mean, it's kind of easier to think about plugging in a technology. That's why maybe AI is getting all the buzz this year, right? You get a lot of buzz. It's because that, that kind of can supplement the workforce. But I feel like sometimes there's too much enthusiasm about this. So if you're going to toss your weight behind a technology solution, you can't do that at the expense of motivating workforce and getting them, engaged and rewarded the way that you're talking about, right? So you can't just do one and not the other. You have to do both.
So just to play devil's advocate for a minute, let's think about this, right? Let's say I'm an employer who's maybe like, oh, this is never going to work in my organization. We can never afford to do this, right? Equity would be just too much. What's the answer to that? Right? Is there a way?
You're talking about from our particular.
Just bringing that together. Like I can see employers being like, oh, this is never going to work. Look, there's a lot of this that still goes on with earned wage access. Oh, this will never work. Yeah. Our employees will never take it. They'll just do nefarious things.
You also see a big glut behind like what ancillary benefits or what ancillary programs can I toss into the mix, and you see this like compilation of things that you're offering an employee that go into their work-life balance and that go beyond the workplace. And I don't know, like, is that the right answer? It's certainly not solving all the issues. It certainly doesn't address.
In the turn of the century, George Eastman of Eastman Kodak, he wanted his factory workers to produce the cameras quicker. Yeah. So he started to pipe in classical music at lunchtime in the cafeteria to get people to calm their mind, and then they would go in and produce and maybe he started it, but I have been puzzled myself at how many things are offered by an employer that don't got nothing to do with work.
More and more.
Yeah. And I often wonder, are these just weird forms of bribery? Yeah. And so we have this thesis at our company, which is, okay, sure, employers should always engage employees, and that's great, and they should do that. But the missing piece of this, in my opinion, is can you get the employee to engage with the work? Imagine that. True. Imagine that. Yeah. No longer in addition to employers engaging an employee, what about the employee engaging with the actual job itself, making the job something they want to come do?
Right. Instead of the days of having the ping pong tables at the office and like arranging the furniture in special ways so that you can.
And so that's like it's sort of crazy to me that you offer these ancillary benefits, these voluntary benefits, and there's nothing wrong with those things. But if you're only relying on that, what you are really just doing is assuaging the friction, and as opposed to saying, look,
you're deferring it.
Yeah, it's almost like, hey, look over here. Yeah. Don't look over here, look over here. And there's nothing wrong with that. But I think one of the things that we've lost sight of is, what about getting that worker to actually want to do the work itself?
Yes.
And how do you actually improve that? And how do you, in some cases, do it programmatically or leverage technology or through management? How do you sort of get that bond fixed?
Yeah.
Because look, how many times have you heard, well, I like my manager, but I can't stand this job. So I'll keep in touch with her over social media.
Yeah,
and I'm out.
Yeah.
Well, I think one of the interesting paths along that has been, all of the hype around giving you opportunities, right? So the whole talent mobility and how to identify projects or activities that you can get an employee involved in that's interested in that, and that follows at least that train of thought, right? But it also maybe doesn't address the issue of what is your primary work, right? And so is it a distraction because you're offering them a chance to work on something additional, right? But you still have that base of work that you have to address.
Yeah, and I think we have lost sight in some contexts of, well, it's not called play, and it is called work.
Yeah.
And there's nothing wrong with making things more enjoyable for the employee. But just don't forget, you got to get that person to actually want to engage in the actual job itself.
Yeah.
And I think we've kind of lost sight of that thing because it's easier to offer other stuff. I mean, I don't want to have a 30-minute disciplinary discussion with my son. I'd rather just take him to ice cream. Yeah. Okay, it's a lot easier to do that than to actually try to create real change. And because that's hard, it's taxing, it's burdensome, and I'm really bad at it, and I like ice cream.
Yeah. Do you think, Julie, you're out there all the time, do you think employers really get it? I mean, when it comes to like the fact that there's this massive gap and this trust gap and all this, like, I know they know there's engagement problems, I know they know there's retention problems, but like, do you think they really get that, like, the old ways are not going to work anymore? Do you think yet?
I think one of the biggest issues for employers is who gets it, right? because you can have a lot of folks that get it, and even a lot of folks in HR that get it, but they may not be the decision makers, right? They may not be pulling the strategy cords, and so it's the age old setup of who gets it, and then who's kind of leading the strategy and the direction, and then who's holding the purse strings, and are those three things coming into line with each other, or are they not?
We did a show on when your executives are investing but not invested in HR transformation. And there's a difference, right? Just cutting a check and buying a system and putting it in is different than leaning in and as a culture saying we're going to make a change in this organization for the better around people. And that's what I wonder if there's still that disconnect of invested and investing and an opportunity.
So obviously, no doubt that it comes from the top, of course. But look, I will tell you, it's a tale of two cities. I can't not say that I think that a lot of folks have unfortunately woken up after the last 10 years of growth and zero interest rates, and where capital was plentiful. And I think, for better or for worse, some people have woken up and said, wait a minute, all of that investment I made in HR technology and in HR, okay, like every other business that I have is measured on some level of performance. So what is the measurement here? Like I spent a lot of money doing HR transformation or technology, or frankly, even HR departments growing and growing. I mean, whoever thunk you needed a employer experience, brand demand. I mean, all these new jobs that we've all invented, probably, here. But the question is, I think a lot of operators are saying, I don't get it. Like, how do I measure the effectiveness of this? And, in the last 10 years when capital was plentiful, no one ever thought to ask those questions. But now I think people are asking those very difficult questions. That's on one side. On the other side, no, I still think, I'm talking to a company, we're about to launch for a company at Salt, and I would have told you now they would never have done it. Like when we prospected them originally, I said, no, this company's probably too worried about certain aspects of their margin structure, their business. But from CEO on down, like, this is the best thing I've ever heard. We got to do it. How do we fast track?
Opening their minds.
Yes, and so I don't mean to be equivocating, but I think though it's like those are the two things that I'm seeing, and it really just depends how much pain you have. On one hand, if you've got margin pain, you're the one asking, okay, what has this gotten me? If you're over here and you've got labor pain, you're still willing to make the investment.
Yeah, absolutely. You're right. And that sometimes that's the problem, is the reactionary nature versus the be proactive with it. And I think that's where most are in that reactive moment, right?
Well, HR struggles still with just what do I measure to even figure out if I've made progress or I've not made progress, right? Am I measuring the size of my HR budget? Am I measuring productivity, and how do I even do that? And so just figuring out what the measures are to cross the bar has been an eons old problem for HR as well. And I'm not sure, are we doing any better at that?
Well, we'll see, right? I think we're entering into a point where now employers are really having to step back from themselves and go, hey, look, these things, like we've said all along, these things aren't working. The old ways aren't going to get it done. We're going to have to do some creativity. But do you think the horse out of the barn? Do you think we can? I mean, there's a lot to factor in here. Society, we've got all kinds of economic problems and pressures and inflation, and right. I mean, do you think it's too late? Do you think we're
too little, too late?
Is the horse out of the barn?
Well, look, the answer is it better not be.
I hope not. Yes.
Regardless of what I think.
Our productivity is not getting better, right? Our GDP is not getting better.
Yeah.
We got to do something as a nation.
There are some not so great outcomes and not so great answers. That's job replacement, that's automation, that's all the things that I think we all know are kind of lurking in the background. There's AI, and look, I'm guessing if there was some underground roundtable of the top 20 CEOs of McDonald's, hourly workers, everyone's trying to get that machine and robotics and automation. I mean, even something as trivial as kiosk ordering. Think about how just that has been incredible, right? Now store staffing for McDonald's has gone from 50 down to 30.
I was 34. Just in San Francisco, and they have I think it was San Fran, they have one of those stores where you swipe your card to walk in. And I think you get your things and you walk out, kind of like China has, where they just RFID Yeah, I thought that was interesting. I was like, wow, that's an interesting. I've not seen that physically. I've heard about it, read about it, but yeah.
So look, I think that that's out there, but look, at the end of the day, people are people. We have a lot of workers. I think if we got rid of all those workers, I think we'd have other bigger social unrest issues. And so I think my hope is that that technology can be used to draw the best out of folks and make them the best versions of themselves.
Oh, yeah.
But I'll tell you, I have another kind of my last plug, or my last observation rather, is I just think we're past this era of like top down. It just this notion of you're going to roll out a new program, and then your VPs will understand, and then your managers will do this, and then your squad leader has to, and then
it's very command and control way,
oh my goodness,
right?
I think technology ought to be able to go flip that on its head and go bottoms up, and it should be self-initiated, and and it should be like, it's really incumbent upon people like me in my industry to build technology that's so easy to use that it doesn't require the employer's involvement. Because I think, look, we want to get great things out of the workforce, but the impediment will always be, can the employer execute on what they're trying to get done? And that's a tall order. A really, really tall order.
And beyond that, I think your executives have to prioritize the bottom of the stack, right?
Yes.
They have to prioritize the masses when traditionally your learning and your performance and your development has been focused so much on leadership that, the priority has to really be flipped.
Yeah.
In order to adopt some of these things.
Yeah. This has been a great conversation, Jason. I really appreciate you so much. What's next for Salt? Tell us what you guys got up their sleeve.
Yeah, well, look, you heard it here first on this show. We launched in April of this year, and we were, thank you. We were, so we launched in April thanks to our investors who backed me. 100% of the money that went into Salt was from Daily Pay investors. So it was great to get that validation, and so they have been supporting us along the way. We launched a product, kind of like an alpha product, and we kind of got the results that we thought we would get, which is great. And now we're starting to onboard employers. We started about a month ago, and you'll hear some stuff out of us towards the end of the year about, hey, we've got our first cohort of employers. They're on it. Here's what they're seeing, and then look. Who knows? 7 years ago, I said, look, I know you don't believe me, but every company is now going to have to offer this, and you'll see it in job ads. You'll see it in the new hire training. That's what I said about earned wage access and on-demand pay. And I'm making the call here that 7 years from now, it won't just be the paycheck that people receive. They're going to have to go earn something that's permanent.
So we just need to have some touch bases before 7 years from now, right?
Well, I want you to come back with a client. You should come back with a client.
Definitely.
Let's talk about it. I'd love to hear the impact of this.
I had to timestamp this because if it works, I'm a futurist. If it doesn't, Pete, bury the podcast.
That part
Cut it out.
Cut that part.
Take out the futurist label.
Well, thank you so much, Jason. It's been great.
You bet.
Enjoy the rest of the conference, man, and good luck to Salt. I'm excited about you guys.
Thank you both.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Take care.